In the past few minutes, the White House confirmed President Trump has spoken to Vladimir Zelensky following the Anchorage summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Her got yachts that look more like floating cities, palaces dripping in gold, and a shadow empire so massive that even Donald Trump, the man who mocks rivals, humiliates allies, and almost never backs down, chooses his words carefully around him. This isn't just another billionaire, and definitely not your average oligarch. This is Vladimir Putin, a man who climbed out of the dark corridors of the KGB and placed himself right at the peak of global power, building an empire stitched together with fear, loyalty, and influence so deep it's made him one of the most untouchable figures of our time. On the surface, Putin's life appears average. The Kremlin claims he makes roughly $140,000 a year. He has a little apartment, a trailer, and a few basic automobiles. That's it. A modest civil servant. But some call this one of the greatest deceptions of our time. Behind the curtain, hidden in offshore accounts, secret trusts, and assets registered under friends and colleagues, investigators believe his wealth may extend anywhere between 40 billion to 200 billion, making him probably the richest man alive. And yet, it's not only the magnitude of his riches that counts. It's how he developed it, how he conceals it, and how he weaponizes it to preserve control. The narrative starts amid the tumultuous instability of the 1990s. The Soviet Union had dissolved, and Russia was a country in economic freefall. State-owned sectors, oil, gas, steel, and finance were privatized overnight. A few cunning and unscrupulous guys picked up these gems for cheap, creating the first Russian oligarchs. For regular residents, it was a nightmare of poverty, inflation, and insecurity. For Putin, then a little-known bureaucrat in St. Petersburg, it was a chance. He wasn't simply watching the game, he was learning how to regulate it. As deputy mayor, he was reportedly engaged in arrangements that enabled insiders to earn tremendously in return for loyalty. But as he moved into Moscow's inner circle and finally to the president, the rules altered. Putin turned the whole system upside down. In the West, millionaires financed politicians. In Russia, under Putin, the politician owned the wealthy. The message arrived in 2003 with a stunning public warning. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Russia's wealthiest man at the time, dared to oppose Putin politically. He was arrested, accused of fraud, and his firm Yukos was destroyed. Cameras showed him standing in a cage during trial, a millionaire reduced to nothing. To oligarchs, the message was simple. Your riches are not yours. It exists only because Putin permits it. From then on, the price of keeping billions in Russia was devotion, and a cut for the Kremlin. Critics like financier Bill Browder even testified before the US Senate, alleging Putin personally demanded up to 50% of oligarchs' assets to ensure their safety. In other words, a mafia state camouflaged as a contemporary government. The oligarchs became guardians of riches, funneling it via shell businesses, investments, and offshore havens, but always knowing it ultimately belonged to one man. The genius of this system resides in its obscurity. Putin seldom puts assets in his own name. Instead, Putin trusts a group of buddies. Persons like Sergei Roldugin, a classical cellist, who magically surfaced in stolen offshore papers owning billions of dollars in assets. Nobody actually believes a musician brought off billion-dollar agreements. But establishing Putin's name behind it? Almost difficult. That's the genius. Riches without fingerprints, power without paper traces. Still, bits of his empire seep out like sequences from a James Bond film. In 2021, Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation unveiled a video of what they named Putin's palace. $1 billion mansion on the Black Sea. The property purportedly had an underground ice rink, a private theater, vineyards, and even hidden passages to the sea. The research went viral internationally, with millions horrified by the magnitude of excess. But in Russia, official TV rejected it as Western disinformation. Protests were repressed, Navalny was imprisoned, and Putin's control only deepened. That's the paradox. Exposures designed to weaken him frequently make him stronger. And that pattern repeats. Western nations imposed sanctions after Crimea, after election tampering, and after the Ukraine invasion.
A lot has been happening in Russia since President Vladimir Putin managed to get through his proposed constitutional reforms in a referendum.
Yachts were seized, oligarchs' accounts shut, and firms blacklisted. But Putin himself? He remains sanction-proof. Because the riches isn't technically his. It's spread in networks so sophisticated that untangling them might collapse whole financial systems. Even when friends lose assets overseas, their existence at home still relies on him, so loyalty holds. This generates something terrifyingly effective. Putin doesn't merely have riches, he is the source of riches. His existence is closely related to the riches of dozens of oligarchs, politicians, and generals. If he falls, they fall. If he remains, they prosper. That reliance makes treachery virtually difficult. He's constructed a system where defending him means protecting themselves. And while money ensures loyalty at home, perception secures influence abroad. Putin has perfected the art of converting weakness into strength. Consider Russiagate, the storm of investigations investigating Moscow's intervention in the 2016 US election. The Mueller report showed over 200 connections between Trump's campaign and Russian officials. Most leaders would have been crushed by disclosure of such involvement. For Putin, it was a win. Inside Russia, official media framed the story as evidence that Moscow was so strong it might upset American democracy. Putin, they concluded, had outsmarted the world's superpower. Outside Russia, the scandal widened party splits in America, making US politics seem chaotic and disorganized, precisely the type of image that helps Moscow. Putin knows what Western politicians frequently miss. In the internet era, perception is more powerful than fact. If enough people think you're strong, you are. If enough individuals distrust their own institutions, they weaken. Putin's training in the KGB prepared him not to fight with tanks and weapons alone, but with psychology, manipulation, and information. That's where Donald Trump's involvement gets intriguing. Trump, a guy who feeds on control, brashness, and mocking, curiously regards Putin with care, even reverence. While he mocked friends like Angela Merkel or lambasted North Korea's Kim Jong-un, with Putin he used adjectives like genius and strong leader. Why? Because Putin offers what Trump has long craved: full impunity. Trump constructed skyscrapers and casinos, but faced litigation, bankruptcies, and investigations. Putin established a wall of fear and riches that shelters him from all of that. For Trump, Putin is the personification of unbreakable power. At the 2025 Alaska summit, Trump publicly lauded him, even giving him a ride in his limousine. Russian media splashed such photos over every channel, depicting Putin as America's equal, if not superior. The accord struck didn't matter. The true reward was the optics. Putin standing tall, revered by the US president, bolstering his image at home as invincible. This isn't luck, it's strategy. Putin has perfected the art of psychological warfare. By pleasing Trump's ego, commissioning pictures, and praising his heroism, he persuaded Trump into handing him a symbolic victory that mattered more than policy. Every handshake, every praise, every grin reinforced the idea of Putin as a global leader who cannot be ignored, cannot be isolated, and cannot be reduced. And while the West argued, Putin reinforced his power at home. Opposition leaders repressed, independent media destroyed, and internet freedoms throttled. Navalny, possibly his most deadly domestic critic, was poisoned, imprisoned, and finally silenced for good. Even when Navalny's discoveries reached millions online, within Russia they failed to stir revolution. Why? Because Putin's system of fear, surveillance, and propaganda guaranteed no spark became a blaze. Meanwhile, the Ukraine conflict, which should have been his undoing, turned into another instrument. Western sanctions were meant to damage Russia, but the nation adapted. Trade migrated to China, India, and the Middle East. By 2024, Russia actually recorded more millionaires than before the conflict. The system bowed, but it didn't shatter. And Putin exploited the confrontation to justify even more centralization of authority, casting it as Russia versus the world. That's why even Trump, with all his swagger, walks gingerly. Because Putin isn't simply another international leader, he's the creator of a system that merges money, terror, psychology, and perception into one of the most persistent power systems of modern times. To challenge him isn't simply to confront a guy, it's to confront a complete system geared to endure any assault. The reality is, Putin's biggest weapon isn't oil or nukes or even his hidden billions, it's the sense of invincibility. He's developed an aura where every assault makes him appear stronger, every controversy adds to his mythology, and every sanction feeds the narrative of a leader too powerful to pull down. That aura impacts how other leaders react with him, for tyrants in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. He's evidence that rejecting the West is doable. For democracies, he's a continual reminder of how vulnerable institutions can be in the face of manipulation. From the dilapidated alleys of 1990s Russia to billion-dollar mansions, from secret accounts in Panama to meetings on US land, Putin has accomplished one of the most amazing revolutions in modern history. A mid-level spy becomes a global power broker. A guy who seized the turmoil of a dying empire and made himself into a figure who is paradoxically necessary and untouchable. And that's why, even for Donald Trump, a guy who fears no one and insults everyone, Putin is different. He's not just another politician, he's the one guy Trump regards with care. Because in Putin, Trump finds not just a competitor, but the culmination of his own dream. A guy who has amassed authority so absolute, so impenetrable, that even the world's most unpredictable leader dares not challenge him. In the end, Putin's great talent isn't only his riches or his palaces or his military, it's the system he's established. A system of interconnectedness, perception, and terror that makes him greater than Russia itself. That's the key to his survival. That's why sanctions don't topple him, why scandals don't destroy him, why competitors disappear, and why critics fail. He is the spider in the heart of the web, and as long as the web holds, so does he. And that's why now, in a world full of millionaires and presidents, one man stands alone. The one guy strong enough to make even Donald Trump pause. The one guy who has made himself into something contemporary politics has never seen before. Completely untouchable.